Hi there, I'm Dani Henderson, spiritualtherapist.com. And the man in the screen today is the very right Reverend Dr. Chris Lemmon. Before I bring him into the frame here, guys, this man has been a mentor of mine since 2001. I have studied with him. He is a genius in metaphysics. And I think today what we're looking at is his eloquent current efforts in helping us, the world, understand what is known as human potential. Good afternoon, Chris.
Good afternoon.
How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. I think when you get to be my age, you wake up every day and it's like you look out and it seems like, wow, this is kind of interesting. Yeah, there's a whole element of life is redundant and redundant and redundant. And at some point in time, all of a sudden, the redundancy you're looking at, and you get to find the magic of finding what's new in the redundancy. I'm looking at my front yard this morning, and it's all these white flowers, and I see one yellow flower. And I'm down on my hands and knees digging around, trying to figure out where did that plant come from? And at the base of the root, it looks the same as all the rest. I'm thinking, wow, one yellow flower. That's kind of amazing, right? So I guess, like Gregory Bateson said, really it's the difference in the world that builds structure, builds language, builds value. If we were all the same, why do anything? It's noticing the difference in life and playing on the difference and your uniqueness. That's where potential lies. So that yellow flower was a great opportunity. And so that I'm a storyteller because stories really help people kind of get out of their story, which is obviously not working. You wouldn't be listening to this in the first place, and try to find a better story, right? And because most of the story is fabricated, that's what makes it interesting. We get a few facts, we make up the rest, and it is just the way it is, right? It allows us to be in the picture. There was a guy, I think his name was Callahan, and he got a little plant, one of the little ADB plants that, you pay in those days less than $1 for. And he put it in his kitchen. So he was a college professor playing with some ideas. This plant was a climber, and it started like a little pea plant, and it started growing in the kitchen. And every day they would have dinner and they would talk to the plant. His whole family, his wife, his kids, they'd all talk to the plant. The plant started growing and started growing. They had to water it every hour because it was in such a little container. It would be out of water. It grew all the way. He cut holes above the doorways. It grew into every room in the house. And not only did it grow into every room in the house, his daughter like kind of pinkish, reddish colors. So the flowers on this plant, which are always white, turned pink or green in her daughter's room. And then in her son's room, he liked dark green. They turned dark green. It was just kind of amazing. He actually got into Guinness Book of World Record. It was amazing. I had like miles of vine watering and watering and watering and watering. It was kind of, everybody in the family was glad that whole season was over. They could abandon it. But it's amazing. That's an amazing piece of potential. Taking an idea that's just crazy and a relative inexpensive investment and get a family to agree in the whole nature of relationship and then work together to accomplish a meaningless goal, but a profound goal, right? In potential for their relationship between the family, all caring and all doing that and supporting this silly little plant. It's just wonderful. I mean, could you imagine the world would change if we all just kind of supported each other?
Absolutely.
Some way, shape, or form?
Absolutely. And that right there, that's just like a beautiful parable, but it's actually a real life recorded happening, that they were imagining themselves, the children, changing the color of the plant, of the flower. And it did literally physically shift and change and become that color. And again, going back to human potential, yes, as you said, wouldn't it be so amazing if we all supported ourselves and each other? So we have these group agreements. I remember in many of I studied with you for 4 years and learned such an enormous amount of value that I teach on my channel. Like so much of the information I gift is information that you trained me in, that you taught me, that you opened my mind to. One of your statements was always, entertain the idea, entertain the concept, which is a choice. You take it or you don't, but there's no there's no task to it. There's no, you know, kind of weight of energy of, oh, I need to entertain this. It's like, you're just like, entertain it. And one of the things about you two that I've always loved and adored is that I would always say, wow, man, did you ever come to rattle the cage of humanity? Like, you just rattle, 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 you know, so you're kind of one of those people that we call an activator. And then you have the softest heart, but really you don't give a shit if people get upset or not, just that they have some kind of a response for self, or to create a thought. Now, one of your programs right now, which is brilliant, is patterns. So can we step into that a little bit?
Yeah, you know, everything in structure in our logical world, everything in this world we live in is made of structure. You look at it in a microscope, blah, 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 blah. It's all made of structure of some sort. You know, we humans have about 7 ± 2 bits of consciousness. And that's from a paper written by Arthur A. Miller, which is the most quoted paper in the world of psychology. So it just means that most of the time we're unconscious. All these patterns are kind of running things. Now that's really good news, because that we don't have to think about it. If we have this much consciousness, it's just as well that we don't think about it, right? It's just put our attention on what we need to have our attention on, narrow it down and have strong focus, and let the rest all work automatically. How many times do you drive home, don't even remember driving? It's like, it's just all unconscious patterns. So they're huge. Well, the dilemma sometimes with those patterns is they can get mutated or amended, right? Because, you know, life doesn't always go well for us, especially in the beginning. You know, we all had some challenges. And so that's the nature of it. So when these unconscious patterns form, they're legitimate. They actually all work. But when somebody throws a wrench in that monkey works, then all of a sudden the pattern gets augmented. So every time that pattern cycles, it's all redundancy. It just repeats and repeats and repeats. When it cycles, it gives us a false positive. It gives us a misdirection. It doesn't work very well. People come to me and they say, my life's not working. And I said, tell me when it worked. And they go, well, yeah, okay, let's go back to age 2, 3, 4. How back does your memory go? How well did it work then? If it didn't work then, it's still not working, because it's been redundant since then. You learned it and it just repeated. That's what you do. So this is what's intriguing about it. So there's lots and lots and lots of programs out there on working with unconscious patterns. They're really expensive and they take thousands of hours of training. But I put together a really simple 7-step one, not to give you information. Why would you need information about something unconscious? That's an oxymoron. What we really need to do is we need to open it up. Just like we need to get up in the morning and move. At the end of the day, we got something done because we moved. I have a little protocol where I spend 2 hours in the yard every day. I don't have something I have to do in the yard. I just get up and I walk around and I say, oh, there's a tree branch broken. There's some trash right there. Some weeds over here. I don't know. I spend 2 hours out there because the neighbors come over and they say, your yard is beautiful. And I go, well, that's simple. I spend 2 hours a day in my yard. And for me, it's like exercise. I don't want to go to the gym. That's too boring. I can go out in the yard, play with the flowers, say hello to the bumblebees and the birds and hummingbirds, and kind of get a little nature mystic coming, forth. And that's just kind of fun. I feel good about it. I get dirty. I pick up a little bacteria, which is kind of good for our body. And that's the whole nature, I think. We need to put programs in place with our little bit of consciousness that benefit who we are. And the rest of it, we need to then let run on automatic programs, but occasionally update the programs. And to update them, all you do is open them up. That's
amazing. It's amazing. It's great analogies. And yeah, you are a great storyteller. And that is one of the ways that we learn. Certainly one of the ways I personally learned, by story, by connecting to. Because the minute we hear something, we're always looking for a mental reference, unconscious or conscious, and we log on to that, and then we'll have a matching story or something similar. Or it's right. Beautiful. Talking of stories and patterns, I don't know if you remember this. I don't think I said it in our last broadcast, but like when I'm with you, I remember all of the other students that I learned with over those 4 years. So many magnificent, wonderful people that you trained and taught on human potential. And we had a Christmas party one year, and it was at this lovely country club and all of the students and teachers came together. And there's this one woman, and she was a big girl. She was a short, big girl, and her name's Erna or Irma. So funny. So that night we were all bang, slam dancing and dancing our asses off and having the best time ever. And Erna or Irma was jumping and leaping, and I remember looking at her and I could feel her joy. She was down the timeline of when she was 17. When she finished dancing, I was dancing with her. We kind of had a little chat. I'm like, oh my God. I said, you're such a fantastic dancer. And she's like, oh my God, Dani, I felt like I was 17 again. It was so great. But the next day I called her. I'm like, how are you doing? She's like, I can't move. She was in bed for 3 days. But, I look at that and because that taught me something about human potential and patterns. Erna was so excited and feeling the high vibratory resonance of all of us celebrating a party together, having a lovely time. And loads of us had qualified as a minister or a health practitioner or whatever it was we were graduating with your courses and classes. And it reminded me that we can always do that, like that pattern of happiness, joy, success. We can go back down there. We can be that again. However, when we're 30 years later, we may have gained 100 pounds. There's going to be a different outcome to it, right? So yes. So what say you to that? And that kind of looking at evidence of patterns and how we shift and change and that kind of thing.
Well, I can marry that into patterns because she was from Cuba. So you don't get a whole lot of people with a pattern in their body called a rhythm pattern. Rhythm pattern are people that they move their body like this when they're walking, and they're always moving like this. They're always kind of doing this type of thing as they're talking, and they're always kind of moving around. And so we see that sometimes with Italians that are moving around. We see that with people in a central belt. So she was from Cuba. So she grew up dancing. That's just kind of what they do. You see that in parts of Africa too. They grow up dancing. So that's really strong. Just the other day, I saw a young man that most certainly ran a rhythm pattern. My wife and I were sitting over there looking, and I think we were at a place called Mount Angel in Oregon. And so it's a German community in Oregon. And we were there just eating German food and looking at the sites and the monuments and the culture. And watched this guy just kind of walk around, and he was just kind of moving all around like this all the time. It's like, wow, it was kind of interesting. I hit another guy one time in Montana. In a restaurant that was a waiter, and he was overweight. He probably weighed, I don't know, 280 pounds. And he was a waiter. And yet he had this fluid movement that he walked around. It's just like, oh my gosh, and so I started a conversation. It was really slow. We were late. I started a conversation with him. So he was telling me he's married, got 3 kids. He was born in that city, lived there all his life, so on and so forth. His wife's got a really good job. He loves working in a restaurant because he doesn't like staying still. He likes to move. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, you got a rhythm pattern, right? That's it. So that's an unconscious pattern that you start to see. And it's kind of like, yeah, she can't shake that, or she doesn't want to shake that, or she doesn't need to shake that. It doesn't make any difference in her life. She was always just very, very fluid. And so that was kind of interesting. Patterns are an interesting piece. Most of the time, I don't think there's any value in changing them, because it's kind of like dyeing your hair a different color. You do whatever looks good with your body and your face and so on and so forth. And you might experiment, and everybody, or at least all women do, some men do. But for the most part, it's just kind of like you're trying to get familiar with what works for you. So when you play with the patterns, it's not like you're trying to change them. You're trying to find out how you can open it up and make it more effective for you. So for Irma, it was kind of like she loved to go to parties and events and dancing because it gave her a chance. Once again, obviously she didn't move very much in life because she was so much overweight. Because she was so bilingual, when you can speak Spanish, you can talk on a lot of companies on the phone for taking orders and so on. That's what she did for a living. She took orders. So she could speak to people. She went up to the ranks. It was now like higher up. She was putting orders in for the company to manufacture and make goods and things. And that's what she was doing. So she spoke very fluidly. And I just imagine her sitting at her desk, kind of like this, and sit there on the phone and be moving all around the whole time that she's talking to someone on the phone. but all that movement gets translated. So people, when they get off the phone with her, they feel invigorated, right? And she would do that. She would inspire people.
Yeah.
She had everybody dancing.
She did, and her voice, and she's one of those really, really happy people. And it was just so beautiful. Again, for me, the human potential was she could have looked at herself in a way that, oh, I've gained weight, I cannot be this, but she was still all of that. She didn't let that interfere with her. And I always admired that about her, you know, because a lot of heavier people will, you know, they'll shrink back, they'll hold back, they, you know, oh, there's the fat, funny one, you know, all these horrible labels that we give each other.
Right.
But yeah, I always kind of really, really admired that. So how would you say, like, having an unconscious pattern and a conscious pattern would come into play for people as they're going through this extremely stressful time, potentially perceived as at this time on the planet?
Well, you know, if I danced competition for a few years in my youth, and I had a girl that was my dance partner. She had been Miss California at one time and was kind of a runner-up for a Miss America contest, and she got involved in that to help her dance studio go into business. And so she did a lot of dancing. And when I had met her, she came in because she was having some emotional problems. So I'm working with her, and it's that same thing. She's telling me that she dances. And I said, wow, that's kind of interesting. My parents would notice I didn't sit still. So they sent me to dance classes all my life. So we danced. So we danced for around 4 or 5 years. She got hurt. So those are conscious patterns. Was I a really good dancer? Well, when I left her as a partner and she got hurt, she wound up injuring her back in a job that she had. And so I had to find a new partner to go into these competitions. And I did horrible. I really wasn't a good dancer. That's a learned pattern. I had been taking classes forever. And I did this just like musician. I've had guitars all my life. I played, and now I'm married to a musician. And she said, quit playing all the notes. I said, quit doing it all. Just hit a note and then leave it go. Skip the next two and then hit another note and then skip the next two and then play another note. You're trying to do it all. Quit trying to do it all. What I was trying to do with dancing was I was trying to do it all. This step, this step, this step, this step. Just kind of amazing. All of a sudden I realized, oh, I'm working too hard at this. What we do with conscious patterns, we have a thing called it's right. We're trying to do it right. Unconscious patterns are never right or wrong. That's what's amazing. They actually produce the outpicturing called us, because we're never right or wrong. We're some shade of gray. It's like, who knows everything, or who thinks they're the best, or all that they got a fairy tale going, right? Mm-hmm. So we're not perfect by design. And the reason why we're not perfect is because patterns are not designed to make us perfect. If they were designed to make us perfect, my gosh, life would be really boring. We need to have that flexibility. So unconscious patterns are simply give us flex, allow us to do things without even noticing we're doing it, which produces what we call personality, charm, all that kind of stuff. And you see people who want the pretense of being charming or sweet, they're so phony, it's unbelievable, right? Mm-hmm. So and that's where you see the difference, if that explained it to you, right?
Yeah, perfect. I'm just going to put this on hold for 1 second. And I don't know if you can do the same your end. Just put it on pause just for 1 second. Okay, so conscious patterns, unconscious patterns, observing. Yeah, and what about that? What you were one of the first people that ever taught me about being or understanding what being a conscious observer is. I mean, can we link that into the human potential and pattern strategy and thinking too?
Yeah, there for a period of time, I was a yoga teacher. I've done a little bit of everything, right? And yes, so I remember going to a lot of Buddhist retreats, and they have all these terminologies for all these. So I have a little bit simpler piece when we start to become the observer. The observer just simply means that we're attending to us. Sometimes the best way to see us is to sit with another person and do what's called an attunement. Attunement just means that you put your guard down and just feel that other person for a second, like you do with a dear friend. You don't become them, you just feel it. So my staging of what would be called meditations is I start to look and I said, I imagine a still lake. I don't have to be still. I imagine a still lake out there. I think we've all seen a mountain lake, some type of stillness. There's not a ripple in it. It's still. And all of a sudden, because it's still, there's no demand on us. It's just there, right? It doesn't want us to do anything. If there's turbulence, all of a sudden we get engaged in movement. There's no movement, it's still. So we're sitting there, and that allows us to notice everything that's moving, which is not necessarily us. So that makes you a conscious observer. You are now all of a sudden consciously observing all that, not engaging, not becoming. You're not necessarily still. There might be emotions and feelings, reactions to things showing up inside here, but the stillness out there sets a stage for us to just notice that. Like sitting, watching Irma dance is one way to do it. Dancing with her is another way to engage with her, right? So it's just observing. Then the second step would be to become still like the lake. So I call those death meditations. I use strong words to indicate not that you would die from the meditation, but that you're now disassociating totally from all that out there. So it becomes still. I have done those meditations with a group of 6 or 8 people in a busy restaurant, in a bar. We're sitting at a bar at a table. I got 6 people, and we go into, and there's noise going on, the place is crowded, there's people waiting, and we're sitting there with a cocktail in front of us waiting for our food. And I go into a death meditation, and the whole place becomes silent. And you're sitting there, and you don't hear anything. The death meditation allows us to go back in and create a relationship with this body function. Not a piece of information, just acknowledging it. Sometimes saying hi to someone makes a difference. Sometimes saying hi to you makes a difference, right? Because now you're valuing you. And so the idea, I had a lady in workshop, we had on a 2-story building, and we were eating upstairs and doing the workshop downstairs. And I noticed she wasn't coming up to eat. Her friend was taking food down to her. So I went down and saw her and I said, hey, we have a problem here? And she said, my knee is bothering me. I can't go up the steps. So I sat down with her and did a death meditation. She was going up and down. She was running up and down the steps after that because it got her back in tune with that. She could all of a sudden make that transition. So that's profound. And of course, then that third thing is that you start to become abstract from all that. You step out of being able to observe you in a package called life. And so you're up here somewhere, right? And so now you're the witness, not only just observing the whole thing, but you're now observing a process. So you're totally detached from that. Usually those are the type of meditations they would do for like 30 days or something. I did a 50-day meditation one time where we didn't eat. We just drank water for 50 days. And so we did it out in a forest somewhere over by Lake Tahoe and up in the woods, in the mountains. And we were up there for 50 days and we just took tons of water with us and we had a few snacks and stuff, but we just didn't eat. And we just sat around, we put up canopies and we just sat there. It was really kind of peaceful. It got rid of a lot of that angst. I said when I was little, I was fidgety all the time moving. And all of a sudden I could just then relax and start to let that go. It always seemed like it was something I was supposed to do. Life, it seems like when you're in school, when you're a kid growing up, there's rules, there's structures, clean your room, blah, 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 don't do this, don't wear that. So it always seems like there's a list of to-do. And making separation from that is accomplished in that meditation. I sat there and it's just like, when I walked from there, I walked away and I'm thinking, I'm sitting after the meditation was over, I'm sitting in a restaurant going to order food and I'm thinking, well, I haven't eaten in 50 days. And I'm thinking, there's nothing on here I want to eat. I had to get up and leave the restaurant and find a different restaurant. I had to drive around for an hour. I could get in the space of like, oh, okay, I should eat. It's like, wow, it was really interesting. And then I was eating food and it was like, it tastes so different. And oh my gosh, 2 days later, I was eating some French fries and took a bite and it's like, there was so much mold taste. It's like, oh, I had to throw them away because normally I don't taste that, right? but it's just like your whole system becomes so sensitive to all of that. It's like it opens up all that range. Not in what we call an advanced meditation, not an easy one to do. I've done a couple of them in my life, but you have to stage it in the right place. You have to right people together, so on and so forth, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
It sounds
And,
like, sorry, it sounds like such a holy ancient practice that you did that you totally separated from, let's say, the stimulus of the world and just kind of went
right.
inside. You speak a lot on range. And for those that may have missed our last broadcast, would you be able to give us an insight into what you mean specifically by range?
So range is the common view that we have of things, right? So when I turn the street to come to home, there's 2 maple trees in my front yard. So the first thing I see from the end of the block is 2 maple trees. Oh, that's home, right? So we have all these pieces, what we call associated pieces. We learn all this stuff and build a package. So we literally have an image. We have an image of, you had an image earlier of what Irma looked like, and you were describing Irma. So that's an image, right? So we have all these images that after a certain point in time, we only see the images that are familiar to us. We literally miss things. I don't know how many times we just had with my wife's business, we just had a meeting last year. We've been meeting at this particular meeting place or restaurant for the last 5 years. And I'm not part of the meeting. So I just kind of go for a walk outside, I'm not part of the company and I do whatever. But I just noticed that across the street, they were building condominiums from it. So all of us came outside and we're leaving. Of course, I was already outside. They came out and they see me and we're talking to me. And I'm looking over there and all those people that in her company, they look over and they say, wow, I never saw those buildings out there. And I said, well, they've been building them the last 2 years. Last year and this year, they've been building them. This was a big hole in the ground 3 years ago, if you remember. And they're kind of looking at me like, how do you remember that? Well, I'm not better than you. It's just that you spent 2 hours in the meeting. I spent 2 hours looking at the hole in the ground. That's the difference, right? So that's a different range. That's a bigger piece. So when you get to a point where life is not working for you, we get divorced or we do something like that, we make a change, we move to a different city, we quit a job, we make a change. That's one way to change range. Another way to change range is just open it up a little bit. Notice what you do and do it differently. Drive a different way. Take on something different. Listen to different music. Read a different genre of books. Go to a movie you never want to see and think, I'll go sit through this and see what it does. And notice, maybe you'll find out why you wouldn't want to go to see it. Maybe a good reason. You might find something inside that's actually blocking you from interacting with people because there's a certain trait that you can't stand. And so there's a certain actor that has a certain trait and you can't stand them. You go see the movie and you sit there and you open up to that and you build range. Range allows us to move in the direction of potential. So if we're really narrow, we always miss the opportunities. I call those clues, right? If you have to look at potential, it's always, we don't give you a manual. If you notice, we didn't get one when we were born either. So when something comes up to offer, what we forget about when we're born, by the time we're 18 or 19 years old and we start to get really independent and we want to leave home and do whatever it is we do, we find that we have built that up for 18, 19 years. Well, all of a sudden, maybe at 30 or 35, you want to change occupations. You have to remember that might take 18 years to establish a new you. That's what it did first time. So we think all of a sudden we're going to go get a new job and become a new us. And we find that, wow, we really need to open that range up really wide so we can get all those variables into it. And that's why we play with range, right?
Yeah, that's brilliant.
In the world today, range seems to be the strongest to play with.
So again, I'm going careful because you're just so brilliant, which is why I'm still connected with you to this very day. And I know your body of work is it's unfathomable. It's volumes and volumes and volumes. You are not easy to find online. You don't have a social media kind of presence. You're not, and that's a good thing too, because we're so programmed a pattern of instant gratification. Oh, Danny's talking to Dr. Chris Lemmon again. Let me look him up. You're not easy to find. And actually, that's kind of a lesson as well. This is a beautiful gift that you are giving to people who will see this broadcast of your lifelong knowings and trainings, but everything you teach has come from actual experience. And I really love that about you. I want to ask you, just go back a little bit, because I'm pretty sure that other people are wondering this. When you sat with the lady in the restaurant who convinced herself because of her sore knee, she would not be able to go up and down those stairs. So then she employs a friend to bring food to her. That was her way of coping and handling. When you sat in front of her and you went into a death meditation, can you share with us what that looked like, what you imagined, what you encouraged her to do?
Yes. She had a story that wasn't working very much. In other words, there was a little bit of a quagmire in this particular lady's youth. She had a lot of responsibility as a child because she had a handicapped mother. And then she loved the horseback riding. She loved playing softball, sports. So there was this little dance about, I go out and play, or I have to be responsible, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. When mother passed, finally, she was an invalid for years. When mother finally passed, it felt like she was finally free of that. But that becomes a pattern. That's not there because you think about it. You just automatically care because it's your mother. You're taking care of her, right? She's a nice lady. So here she is, all of a sudden had more time to go out and play. She could get more horseback riding time and she could do more things. And then she hurts herself. So now she's half the time injured and half the time out and playing. She still has horses, but she can't ride very long because her leg starts to hurt. So finally she had to have surgery on the leg, and my God, this guy was like the best surgeon in the United States for knees. And then all of a sudden he messes up on one of her knees. And it's like, wow. And then the guy 2 weeks later dies. And so she can't even go back and have him fix it or something. And then she's had surgery after that. And they would get stiff and she could barely sit. She was starting to lose her playtime. Because of the pattern that's set up, I donate half my time to mom and half the time to me. And now she's losing the me time because there's no mom on the other side. Balance is important. And when we change that, this unconscious system doesn't know things changed out there. It really doesn't. It seems stupid. It seems like it should figure it out, but it doesn't figure it out. It's meant to be unconscious. It's meant to be able to be an automatic piece. Our intuition is really rich. And all that data builds that database. And it's really good. And we don't want to mess it up because we rely on it. So it's a little guarded. So what I did, by getting her to be able to assume that she just died, totally disconnect. When she came back in again, the story, her mother's demand and hers was no longer there. Now it's all just her. So she was like the most active person, right? The last day of the workshop, we had it in a grand house somewhere in Kansas, big 6-bedroom house. She was out mowing the lawn the last day after the workshop was over because she had so much energy in her body. She was up mowing a lawn on like 1 acre of land. And she's out mowing all the edging while the other lady's driving the tractor around, just because she was so engaged in life. It was like she was back now beginning to play. If that makes any sense, why then that's kind of how it unfolds. I know I express it overly simplified. It has ups and downs. She stays in that mode. And then maybe 2 years later, all of a sudden her knees are giving her a problem. She calls me or sends me an email. She has to send me an email because I don't answer the phone. So yeah, she sends me an email. And,
True story.
And so I talked to her a little bit and we're on the phone engaging. And then next thing you know, she's getting better again, right? So it goes through cycles. Like everything in life, we all fall into habit patterns and we find like, wow, I'm drinking now more, or I'm smoking more, or I'm doing this, or I quit smoking when I was 20 and now here I am 45 years old. I'm now smoking again. What's the matter with me? Those things come back up. Usually we have some trauma in life that kind of takes us down. out of this package, you don't erase things. You just simply move it somewhere else. We literally, just like on a computer, when you delete a file, you just move it somewhere that you can't find. You don't really delete it, right? Until everything's full. So it's the same way in a body. We don't really delete it. We just move it somewhere. If you have a crisis and everything falls apart, then it'll find that. Somebody runs over your poodle, and next thing you know, you're back smoking. You haven't smoked for 20 years because you just got taken down so deep, right? So I do have some techniques that we play with where we can put fixed points in, do some other stuff. There's some tricks. And so, and that's what my life has all been about, is learning little tricks. I see a problem and I say, how can we fix this? How can we keep it fixed? How can we get more longevity out of an asset that a person has? How can we squeeze more potential out of that? So, yes, I got an education in psychology, but I don't have a clinical license. So I wound up being in HR. I wound up training people. I wound up being in business, right? And so to me, when I opened a center, that was 5 nights a week, plus 3 weekends a month that I was giving my time, plus working. So I was up at 5 a.m. going to work, and then trying to get to the center by 6 to teach a class at 6:30. And so it made for a busy day. And I did that for 14 years, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And then after 14 years, well, it's kind of like, okay, time for change. So I shut it all down, did something different.
Just amazing. And I, I can obviously confirm that you were utterly, utterly devoted to the human potential and the healing for humanity. And you shared, techniques. Like I said, I'm sharing on YouTube. I call it BoobTube, but YouTube. And one of them was lately, I've shared this a few times, that you mentioned earlier, when you say hi to yourself, so I've been encouraging people, get in front of the mirror, get as close as you can, look into your pupils, look at the colors around the pupils. We barely ever notice them, and say hi to you, and then see what comes up. It's such a beautiful way to connect, to reconnect. I had 2 clients today. It's interesting how things, so I'm chatting with you right now. And then today I had 2 clients before you, and it's again amazing how energy frequency matches, similar patterns come out in conversation. So just to share, I had one lady who's going through a divorce. The last time I saw her was 4 years ago. People like you, they've been coming for years, just when they need me now and again, or some more regular, lots of new ones because of BoobTube and other things I'm doing. This sweet lady finally is leaving her husband. Finally, she's left him. And so she stopped drinking. They would get into the habits. They're very codependent, as a lot of people are. And when she realized that when she stopped drinking herself, her body was going into traumatic shock. She was responding to the stimuli that she'd been numbing herself to, and then realized that she's a jelly around this vibratory harsh resonance on her sensitive system. And now she's undoing the fact that they've been so codependent, and now all of a sudden he's not talking to her. And I said, well, he's recognized that he can no longer control you through texting you 50 times a day. And so he's turning his back, and now comes the punishment. Now he's showing you he's lost. He's showing you that he's lost. People's patterns are so fascinating. The other lady I had today, her father died recently, and she's very, very intuitive herself. And it was wonderful because her dad came through, had a lovely dialogue. And you know me, I'm such a skeptic. I'm like, if a being comes to say hello, a beloved comes to say hello, they better bring proof, or I'm not playing. You don't get to come in. And I was, among other things, I was saying to this lovely girl, okay, your dad's showing me beans. He's showing me red beans. He's showing me black beans. I don't know what this means to you. It's not about me. It's about you. She went, he always called me Beans. That was my nickname. So that lights me up, because I'm like so happy to bring solid evidence for someone. And then I was able to then explain to her the way you're feeling. And I learned a lot of this from you, and the explanation from you and Dr. Mayu Soro Espinosa, our beloved, who's now in the realms, that when a parent, for example, dies, we've only known ourselves, the child, with their energy running through us, survival energy, whatever it is, when they leave, they take their soul essence with them. So we then literally are left to, who am I? Who am I without that parent? Who am I? Happens in marriages too when we become codependent. We're lying beside that person all night, every night in their energy frequency. But to explain to this lovely person today that wouldn't understand what's happening inside of you is a re-identification, a repatterning of you as a new person kind of moving forward. What do you say about that?
Okay. Yes. Once again, I said we hit a crashing point and then all old patterns come in. They don't ever go away. And so most of the time when life gets uplifted, you talked about Mayu. So when she came to me, she was going somewhere else, taking classes. She was a real sweetheart. And so she had a critique of what they were doing. She had more life experience than the teachers that she was going to, because she'd been around a while, and a real sweet lady. She came to me and I said, she was saying, well, I'm taking classes from these young people and learning things, but they just know it this narrow. And I'm trying to get it this wide. And she said, so it's very frustrating. So she said, I'm trying to find a teacher that can see it wider, right? I don't have a problem with the tools. I just need to get it wider. If it gets it wider, it fills the space. If it's this narrow, you have all this unconscious piece on both sides that overwhelms it and controls it. And so it's got restrictions. You wind up going to do a job and you forget something. And it's like always a habit pattern. You always forget something. I have people that are always late by 10 minutes. I have people that are always forget this one piece. And forever, I get people that say, oh, I take my phone because I always got to check this, always got to check that, always forget that. I got to call back. I got to do this. Like, my gosh. So we're doing all these workarounds because we won't open the range up a little bit and include all this stuff. Mayu wanted to include this stuff. When she came to me, she said, my husband's a doctor. I always felt like I'm just a nurse. I'm less than him. And our relationship was what it was. She says, now we're both old. She said, I want to become a doctor, not an MD, but I want a doctorate. So I helped her get her doctorate. So I worked with her and we finally got her PhD, right? So we got it. And she worked on a program and she was so frustrated. She came to me. That's why she came. She said, I worked this all out and it didn't work. I said, okay, that's your doctorate. She says, what? You took someone else's body of work and you were going to prove it. What you did, you took their body of work and you proved it's wrong. That's legitimate. It doesn't work. Write your paper. She wrote her paper. It was kind of amazing. It's just like, and then all these people came in and said, yeah, we've been trying to do that. Person said it never worked for us, but we never did anything with it. We just ignored it. Okay, don't work. You have proved it doesn't work. It's like, well, it's great. So that was huge, wide range, right? And it was really, at that point, she was sitting there and she came to me one day and she was in tears. And she said, I thought once I got a PhD, I was doctor. Everything would be on equal terms. And she said, it doesn't feel that way. And I said, you know, hon, you're going to have to be real careful here. Because now you're treading on stuff. When you open that range, you're letting a lot of insecurities that came from. She was born and raised in a prison camp. And so it wasn't probably the best of life. And her father committed suicide because he was in a prison camp, right? So you start to see she's opened up a whole doorway when you open that range up. And I said, you and I need to sit down and work with this a little bit because it's very dangerous what you're getting into. We really need to be able to open that range up and play in that with what we discover. Just like if you see a snake, you could run, but instead you could sit there and have a conversation with the snake. You just don't get too close. The snake's got afraid and you're not afraid. You can have a relationship with that snake. They're not going to talk to you, but they can look at you and you can kind of feel that, and you can feel when their fear leaves. You can feel all this stuff. Mm-hmm. So I started talking to her and then all of a sudden she disappeared. I don't know what happened. And then if you remember, she fell through a glass door in the shower. And at that point, that was a minor wound. So that's the next time I heard from her was from healing work. And they found a brain tumor. And so that's what was finally the exit point, was a brain tumor. Again, I can remember her saying to me, she says, I need to just get out of this. I've been in this too long. I said, it's a choice. You get to choose. And she says, I think I need to go. I said, okay. So that was it. Very intense. She was a sweetheart. I really liked her.
Yeah.
She couldn't get past that stigma in that childhood. That was tough.
Yeah.
We've all had some type of traumatic experience, pretty much, right?
Yeah,
So
we
it's
really
like
have.
what it is, and it's always in the shadow somewhere.
Mhm.
It's always real. There's not some story. It's actually real. It happened, and that's exactly what she had. She had a real experience that really happened.
Mm.
When she got out of the prison camp, her and her mother lived in a chicken coop for 3 years. Like, wow. So it wasn't like she got hurt. It wasn't like she got damaged in any way, shape, or form. It's just that the quality of life was not rewarding. But she was a sweetheart.
She was an amazing lady, and we had
Yes.
wonderful experiences with her. And there's so much to cover here. And guys out there watching this, we are going to do a part 2. Part 1 here was to introduce the idea of range, human potential, and patterning, and look at how we follow and recognize patterns to help us on this massive healing journey that so many millions of us are on at this current time. Chris, when we do part 2, we'd love for you to bring some of the healing techniques and some of the, I mean, you've taught me so many over the years, and some of those techniques, those tricks, as you called them, to help people in their human potential.
Okay, it sounds good. Well, thank you very much. That's just been, it's been fun. And it feels like we're connecting parts of the world together, which is even a bigger story, because I think the human race is in a direction of moving to become a global people rather than tribal people fighting with each other. I think at some point in time, we're going to become a global people. I'm not sure it's going to happen in our lifetime, but maybe in another 1,000 years, it might happen. So anything we can do to get those connections together, I think is profound, right?
Definitely. And again, this is all about sharing what we think. You know, we've all got different ideas. Some of us we believe, some of us we don't, but it doesn't matter. It's all a melee. It's all a smorgasbord. It's all a big pot cooking, and how we all kind of get through this thing that we call life.
Right.
Dr. Chris Lemmon, you are a joy. Thank you so much, sir, again, for spending time with us. And I look forward to part 2 with you soon.
Yeah. And so you look like a princess, and I think that's adorable.
Oh.
And
thank you so much.
If I would have known you were going to be a princess, I would have dressed up like a cowboy. So we would have been in child space. Totally. But it's very attractive. So anyway, so thank you very much. And we'll talk again.
Definitely. Thank you, sir. And to you guys out there watching, we will be with you very soon. And there will be part 2 of Human Potential. My name is Dani Henderson, and I send you my love. See you soon.